Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome to another session of our Day One and Beyond series, where we take you through various topics and activities related to building out on Oracle Cloud. Our today's session is the Oracle Cloud Business Operations Quickstart, where we will cover the fundamentals of operating workloads on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI, and how to start your account off correctly with the best practices. So you'll learn about different OCI tools used to keep track of cloud resources and consumption costs. And with that, I'll hand it over to Winnie.
Thanks, Olivia. So, hi everyone, my name is Winnie, and I'll be taking us through the first half of the session. And at the end, we'll also have a demo to show you some of the tools we've talked about during the lecture portion. So we'll just go ahead and get right into it. So on today's agenda, Olivia mentioned that, we'll be going over quite a few different tools that help you manage your cost consumption in your environment. So we'll be covering those today. So some of these include compartments, how they're used, what they are, and just some key considerations when you're setting them up. The tagging service in OCI. So what kind of tags are offered to you, how to create them, and how to automate tagging as well. Cost and budget analysis. So being able to create and save and analyze your cost analysis reports using the cost analysis dashboard, as well as how to set up budgets and how to use them. We'll also be going over our recommendation engine called Cloud Advisor, and it will recommend you different ways for you to save on costs, performance, and etc. Lastly, we'll also talk about the difference between quota policies and service limits and how you can use them to make sure you're not over-consuming. So next up, just to kind of preface everything we're going to be talking about today, this is a slide that kind of goes over the differences in responsibility when it comes to you as the customer versus the cloud service provider, which is OCI in this case. And as you can see, when you really make that first step into cloud, into IaaS, about half of that responsibility is given to OCI to manage and update. And as you continue into your cloud journey, more and more of that responsibility is given to OCI. So, what that does for you as the customer is it opens up more time for your employees to really focus on maybe some other job functions that will benefit your businesses better. So this is a look at our cloud ecosystem and how the moving parts kind of come together and work. So I just wanted to really focus on the cloud services section, which is the middle gray section here, and just point out which sections we'll be covering today, which will be management as well as governance. So I wanted to kind of get us in a perspective that will get us ready for all the different tools we'll go over. So I wanted to introduce or reintroduce Vision Corp. So Vision Corp is a mock company that my colleagues and I have created, especially for training and demos. So in this scenario, Vision Corp recently did a lift and shift migration where they migrated their legacy apps to OCI. So now that they're in the cloud, they're really wondering, how can they efficiently manage the cost for this cloud hosting, and which tools will give them the ability to see what they're consuming in terms of cost so that they can make decisions based off that. And so for that use case, this is a few ways how OCI can help with their ask. So one is compartments. This tool will allow you to logically separate your resources. Tagging, so getting a view of resource usage from various perspectives, one of them being a cost perspective. And lastly, budgeting and quota. So using budgets to be proactive in managing your consumption and being able to get notified when a certain amount of budget is utilized, as well as using quotas to make sure your employees are not over provisioning resources that might be expensive or over your budget. All right, so the first tool that we'll go over today is compartments. So compartments, by definition, these are going to be a logical grouping of related resources that can be accessed only by groups or user groups that have been given permission through policies. But today I want to really focus on a different perspective on compartments, which is the compartment design layout and why that's so important. So with compartment design layouts, we see quite a bit of different kinds. So some more recent and popular kinds of design layouts we see are full stack approach, shared services approach, groupings by environment stages, or team-based compartment design as well. And so this is really important to really solidify when you're creating your compartments, because by creating this design layout, you're essentially also figuring out, which people are going to get resources which people are going to get access to these resources that you've set up with this compartment design. And so when it comes to compartments, we also see a couple of common uses. So one is definitely access control boundary, which I mentioned earlier. Also, customer and isolation boundary is another one, cost boundary, and last but definitely not least, budget and quota boundary. So with this last use case, compartments also work together with budgets. So if you wanted to set a budget on an entire compartment, you could do so through the budgeting service. And Sunil will actually go into more detail about that, but I just wanted to introduce the concept of, compartments working together with other tools within OCI. So based on this architecture diagram, I just wanted to break it down a little bit. So this gray dotted line that we have here, this represents the root compartment, and the root compartment will be included in your tenancy. And once you have that, you can start building out your compartments. So we have a child compartment called Vision Corp, and we're following that Vision Corp example. Within Vision Corp, now we have 3 more child compartments called Finance, Marketing, and Info Services. So this design layout is going to be more of a team-based approach. So the respective teams, they will have access to these specific compartments. And then within info services, we have info security, compliance, infrastructure, and etc. So this sub layout is going to be more of a resource allocation design. So this is all just to say that you can definitely mix and match your compartment design layouts. They don't have to be the same kind of design throughout all these subcompartments. Whatever works best for your company, you can definitely set up within your compartment design. So on the right-hand side, you also have some user groups. We have infrastructure admin, we have shared services admin, and we also have IM admin. And we are going to just build upon this architecture diagram in the next slide. So before I kind of talk about what we've added, I wanted to ask Lynn, one of our cloud engineers on our team, how does access to these sub or child compartments work?
Well, typically what happens is that you use these compartments to work with your administration and to make sure your people have access to the resources that need to have access to the resources. And by, for example, if there was an administrator in the information services, then they would also have capability of delegating administration to infrastructure or shared services as well. So it's stacked based upon the parent-child relationship.
Exactly. Thank you, Lynn. So that's going to be a great transition into my next part. So in addition to resources being added to this architecture diagram, we also see that access has been added to these compartments for different user groups. So for example, for the infrastructure admin group, we see that there's been a policy attached to the infrastructure compartment, And so what this indicates is that the infrastructure admin group now has access to the child compartment called infrastructure. Again, similar, we have our shared services admin group. And again, they are also given access to the shared services child compartment through a policy. So lastly, we also have our IAM admin group. And just like Lynn said, the policy access does trickle down into your child compartments by placing them through, by placing a policy access on a parent compartment. So exactly that, with IAM admin groups, maybe they need more overarching access over a couple of child compartments or all. And so what you would do is give them access to that parent compartment through a policy, and they would be able to access the child compartments that are within that parent compartment. All right, so the next service that I wanted to talk about is the tagging service. So with tagging, I really wanted to emphasize the importance of utilizing tagging first. So it's really important to utilize tagging in your environment because like compartments, it gives you a way to design your resource allocation and organization. But with tags, you get more flexibility to be able to organize, manage, and control your cloud resources with an organizational scheme that you define. So with tagging, because of this kind of flexibility that it gives you, we've seen it deliver on a number of solutions. So stuff like chargeback and cost attribution, being able to attribute costs based on tag is one. Organizing and searching for resources becomes a lot more efficient because you can search on your tags. Inventory by tag is another thing that you can control. And you can also control tag spam. So in this next slide, now I'm going to really get into the details of the tagging service. So to start off, we have two types of tags. We have freeform tags, and we also have defined tags. So first off, with freeform tags, these will only consist of a tag key and a tag key value. So only two parts, and there's also no defined schema, as well as no access restrictions. So anyone in your environment who's a user, they can be able to create and apply these freeform tags. Our other type of tag is called defined tags, and it's a little bit different. So these do have defined schema, they are secured with policy, and they also live in namespaces. So namespaces, or we call them tag namespaces, these are basically used to group defined tags. So they contain defined tags, and they're really used for access control. With defined tags, we also have a specific type of defined tag. We call these cost tracking tags. And so these are used to show costs in the My Services UI, and all tags are going to be shown in usage reports. So you can track costs of resources by applying this cost tracking tag. And what's great about it is that you can use these in different compartments. So even if a project, might span multiple compartments, you can keep track of the consumption costs by tagging it with a cost tracking tag. So moving on to how policies can be used for secure tagging. So I wanted to present a question to Sanil. So do you need to be in a group with a policy for tagging to be able to use them, or can anyone working in a tenancy be able to use them?
So that's going to depend on what kind of tag you're using. If you're using freeform tags, then anyone on the tenancy can use a freeform tag. It's a nice way to throw a little reminder on a resource for an individual user. On the other hand, defined tags are much more powerful. They integrate with cost management, they integrate with some of the APIs, and as a result of that, because they're more powerful, you will have to give someone a privilege or give them policy access so that they can, create defined tags.
All right, thanks, Anil. So great transition into this slide. As he mentioned, with with defined tags, you will need to set up policy access. And within policy access, you will need at least the ability to apply tags in order to use them. And this is given through the verb called inspect. So this gives you view only, but we also have different verbs that are commonly used when it comes to working with defined tags. So another one is use. And use allows a group to apply, update, or remove a defined tag for a resource. And we also have manage. So this gives you the most amount of access in a group. And this lets you manage tag namespaces as a whole and also the tag keys inside them. So we've included a couple of examples of what those policies might look like, as well as a more granular example on the bottom here that has a where condition targeting specific tag namespace names with the string name development. So that's also an option for you when you're setting up these policies. So next, I wanted to talk about how you can automate tag application. So this is done through the tool called tag defaults. And tag defaults essentially lets you specify tags that are then applied automatically to all the resources at the time of creation in a specific compartment. So you're really able to just make sure that, appropriate tags are being applied at resource creation. And what's great about it is that it also doesn't require the user who's creating the resource to have access to the tag namespaces it's using to tag. So on the left-hand side here, we also have tag variables. So these are used in conjunction with these tag defaults. So when you're creating your tag defaults, this is a screen grab of what it will look like. So you'll have to specify a default value that will apply as the tag. And so using tag variables as the default value can give you a lot of benefits. So with tag variables, these are basically standardized values that you can use, and they'll give you 3 different values. So one is the name of the principal that tagged the resource, or the type of the principal that tagged the resource, and lastly, the date and time that the tag was applied. So we'll also take a look at this in the console in just a little bit. So I wanted to revisit this architecture diagram just to show how tagging can be incorporated. So for example, one, you can definitely set up tag defaults, especially for your resource allocation, child compartments here. And another way is to use cross-tracking tags. So if you have a specific type of resource that lives in multiple compartments, you can apply that cross-tracking tag to keep track of that type of resource consumption. Next, I want to go over just this quick compare and contrast slide. So we've talked about both compartments and tags. I understand, sometimes it gets a little bit hazy, like which one should I use for what? So this is just a compare and contrast slide. So with compartments, it's going to be best used for setting permission boundaries, utilizing those policies, and also really great for project, department, and environment boundaries. With cost attribution, you can sub total cost per compartment as well as generate budgets on entire compartments as well. Tagging, it's going to be best used for cost attribution and assigning multiple dimensions of metadata. And when it comes to cost attribution, you can use those cost tracking tags to track costs for projects that span compartments and also for job-based chargeback. Lastly, I wanted to go over some best practices for tagging. So one is to use defined tags and take advantage of them, because all of our feature development is going to be around defined tags only. Next is to create tag definitions or tag key definitions for everything you want to search for. So when you're in your tag namespace, you've already created your namespace, and now you're trying to get set up with your tag keys. This is where you'll want to ask yourself, what do you need to search on? What are some keywords? And go ahead and use that as a tag key name. Next is to secure your tag namespaces. So creating at least 2 tag namespaces to establish the distinction between one just for everyone to use and one restricted just for cost tracking. So of course you can create more than two namespaces, but just at the very least, you want to have that difference. Next is to use tag defaults and tag variables. So just taking advantage of that feature, being able to automatically tag all resources in a tenancy or compartment and make sure that appropriate tags are being applied. And with tag variables, being able to tag everything with who created it and when it was created. Lastly is to put all of your tag namespaces at the top of the tree you expect to use it in. So when we talk about the tree, we are referring to the compartment tree that these will live in. And so it's okay to, put these namespaces in the root compartment, but it's best recommended to be placing them in the topmost compartment where they'll be used. So now I'm going to pass it off to Sunil, who will take us through cost and budget analysis, quotas, as well as Cloud Advisor.
Thank you, Winnie. All right, carrying on from where we left off, cost and budget analysis. The first topic we'll go over is OCI budgeting. I know Winnie did mention these a little bit earlier, but budgets are a tool on OCI that, as the name would imply, are going to help you keep track of how much credits have been spent within a certain scope. So the first thing you would do when setting up a budget is set the scope. If you're using identity domains, you could use a subtenancy as a budget scope. You could use a compartment, or you could just take your entire tenancy and have a budget for every single resource that you're using. After you've taken your desired scope and you set the budget, then you will put in the couple of parameters, which are going to be whether you want to track actual versus forecasted spend. Actual spend is going to be set dollar amount. I'll just pull $300 as the number. So when you pass $300 or a percentage of $300 that you can select, so maybe I don't want to be notified when the whole budget is spent. I want to be notified when we're 80% of the way to 300. And then you could also set a forecasted budget, which is going to be a rate of spending. So with this $300 example, let's say there's 30 days in a month, it's roughly $10 a day. And then if your rate of spend is going to be greater than $10 a day, it'll trigger this forecasted budget rule and it will send out a notification. So the other parameters you'll set is who is going to receive the notification that the budget has been breached. And so, question for you, Winnie, how can users use actual versus forecasted budgets to maximize the coverage on their tenancy?
Great question, Sunil. So with actual spend, this will watch the actual amount that you spent in the compartment per month. So if you, want to be notified when it hits a certain value, you can definitely use the actual spend. But with forecast spend, this will keep kind of like a watchful eye on your spending. And it'll alert you when it appears that, the budget will be exceeded. So if you want kind of like a forewarning before you actually hit an amount so that you prevent that from happening, that would be a great way to use the forecast spend.
Cool. And so as a follow-up, can you use both actual and forecasted spend, or do you just have to use one or the other when setting up budgets?
So you can actually set up two, or more than two, but yeah, yes, the answer to your question is you can set up both within a budget and receive alerts for both actual and forecast spend.
Awesome. Thank you. The next tool we'll go over is cost analysis. The cost analysis tool is the go-to location to look for a report on spend on any parts of your tenancy. This could be you want to know how much a certain compartment has used in a certain time interval, and there's many ways that you can query for this information. So you have filters, dimensions, and tags, which we talked about earlier. So filters, we see here, you can search by AD, you can search by a time period. There's many other different metrics. Dimensions are going to be another dimension that you can query by. So it'll be things like region, compartment, availability domain, SKU, resource type. And so you'll have a very robust set of options that you can easily query your data with. The other thing that is very powerful about cost analysis is once you've created certain queries, you can actually save them as a report in the cost analysis tool. So that way, if you know you're going to have to run the same query when you're in the cost analysis tool, you'll just click the little bar for reports. You'll click the report that you've generated, and it will run the query for you, get you the results. And then there's also another field where you can export the reports. If you need a CSV, you're trying to get a cost report, send it to management every week, then you can simplify the steps a lot by having the data in a report. You click the button to export then, and you'll be able to move that information very rapidly. With tags, remember that there are defined tags and freeform tags. The freeform tags are not going to be integrated with this cost analysis tool. So if you are trying to search by a tag, make sure it's a defined tag and make sure that you have the cost tracking flag set on that tag. Moving on to quotas. A quota is a tool that allows you to set a limit on resources that can be used within a specific compartment. Some reasons you might want to use quotas is to prevent systems from being created in non-production environments. You know, there's probably not a great reason for a real application cluster, bunch of database nodes to be spun up in development. You know, maybe a 2-node cluster if you're trying to test high availability or disaster recovery, otherwise 1-node clusters. So you would just be wasting that capability. And the second one is limiting environments to less expensive E2 VMs. And that can be extended for less expensive versions of all resources. A good example of this is, let's say you've got a archival compartment where you're just keeping some storage of data that is not expected to be used very regularly. If that's the case, then you probably wouldn't want to burn extra credits on higher performance storage. And so to just make sure that everyone is following protocol and not using unnecessary resources, then you may as well just zero out the high performance, extreme performance storage and just keep it on regular or low for that sort of a compartment. And so with these quotas, they are applicable at the compartment level. They can be customized very easily, and then they're also controlled by policy. So as a result, they're very flexible to integrate into your environment. And so we'll take a look at quota policy syntax. This here is an example of a quota policy. We're going to take a look at 3 verbs, 0, set, onset. So 0, compute quotas in tenancy. It's going to set your compute quotas to 0 in the whole tenancy. Quotas can also be very granular, as we talked about earlier. So the second example, set compute quota VM standard to 1 count. So we're now not just looking at compute, we're looking at a specific resource within compute, and we're looking at the count of it. I'm going to choose the amount, which is going to be 10 in compartment IT, where request.region is equal to US Phoenix 1. So now we've created a way to make sure that, let's say we have like a development compartment in IT for the Phoenix team, and they're realistically only going to need to use like a handful, several boxes. So to give them a little bit of breathing room, we'll set the count to 10 just to make sure that the dev environment is getting cleaned and it's not getting cluttered with extra VMs that aren't being used or aren't really necessary and just burning unneeded credits. So if you set some quotas up and you've decided that maybe you're having a new compartment structure, maybe you think that you need more or less of a certain resource, or maybe you're just not using that resource pretty much at all. So there's no point to have the quota for it. Then you can unset the quota by just using the unset statement, and it will remove all quotas within the field. So here we're unsetting the dent IO 16 count in the tenancy. And when you create your tenancy, there's a certain set of guidelines called service limits that are set by Oracle. And so for tenancy controls, you will have service limits, and then with individual compartments, you can supplement the service limits by using quotas to help you get good control on what resources are being provisioned in your tenancy. So here we have a couple of steps to summarize the different things that we've talked about. So the first is organize resources into compartments by project and tag them by cost center. And you can have some commutative property or transitive property with these. Let's say you have different teams that you also want. You could have maybe a compartment for project tagged by cost center, and then you can have maybe additional subcompartment or additional final thing being tags for team. If you want to have a strategy where you have compartment for dev, compartment for test, compartment for prod, and then you have different tags within those compartments for different projects, that's equally fine. The key here is having some sort of protocol, because if you just spin up resources kind of arbitrarily, it becomes really hard to backtrack, because someone who spun up something with this hierarchy in mind, where someone is doing it by, by project, by stage of development for tag, and then someone else does it the opposite way, or they do it by cost center, by team, then you're going to have to do a lot more work to go backwards. When if you have it set up from the beginning, it's really easy to track your resources. It's really easy to add new resources into your current hierarchy. And also, when you need to get reports for whatever the reason you need a report may be, you'll know exactly how to find the information that's important to you. So that way, you can just quickly transfer that information up or along the chain. Once you've created your compartment structure, you can create corresponding budgets for each project and cost center. Something else that's nifty is if you do have a system where you might have teams working on different projects in multiple compartments, what you could do is you could have a cost tracking tag for team, which would be giving you a subset based on that tag from different compartments as well. So using budgets is a really good way to make sure that nobody accidentally goes over what they're doing. Budgets aren't something that are, enforced by API. It's not like once the budget is triggered, there's any lockout where you can't provision more resources or it'll deprovision anything. It's just a warning. It's very simple to set up, and it's going to help you manage your spend within, any subset of your users. So it's a powerful tool. It's really low effort, and it can provide a lot of value. After all said and done, you've created your compartment hierarchy. You've set some budgets, some monitoring, some preventative measures maybe, and you're starting to use your tenancy, and you need to go for some data. You can get all of your cost data in the cost analysis tool using any of the metrics mentioned, whether that's that cost tracking team tag, it's that cost center compartment, that project compartment, whatever you'll need. And then lastly, create quotas to limit the use of expensive resources in low budget projects. Quotas are not as powerful as, having good compartment hierarchies, creating budgets, and using the cost analysis tool, but it is something I would urge you not to forget about, because once again, it is very easy to execute. It's one sentence, and it can potentially save you a decent amount of money. in my time at Oracle, I've worked with countless different people who have been spinning up resources and not set the correct setting on the resources and then ended up burning more credits that they want to. And when you look back at it, you realize like by just typing in one line, I could have saved this credit. So even though it seems small, you just do it once, you'll get an infinite amount of use out of it, and you can potentially save quite a bit of money. Last tool, a little bit of a separate vein from the prior, is going to be helping you optimize spending with Oracle Advisor. Oracle Advisor is a built-in free tool that was originally created on the Oracle internal tenancies, and after seeing success internally, it was released publicly. And this is going to have daily scans to take a look for 3 key metrics: cost management, performance, and high availability. The security tab is going to be from CloudGuard, where it will give you a list of some of the important CloudGuard recommendations. And within all of these 4 parameters, you're going to get different suggestions to help you with the respective areas. So for cost management, let's say you've got a load balancer and it has, X throughput. Well, let's say 5 Mbps of throughput usually for that load balancer. And you set it on the 100 Mbps load balancer. You're not really getting 100 Mbps of, bandwidth worth of what you paid for. So cost management will recommend, hey, maybe you can downsize this load balancer to the 10 Mbps version. Similarly, if you've got unattached block or boot volumes that are, eating up a storage fee, then it'll ask you, hey, do you really need these boot or block volumes? And you'll also probably have a message in security saying these unattached volumes should probably be attached to something because it's not good security practice to keep them unattached. So it'll give you recommendations in this sort of vein to help you take information that is generated from the logs in your tenancy and make things a little bit more efficient. To summarize everything, with Advisor, Advisor is going to have a select set of recommendations for you that are going to span all aspects of cloud. And at first, it might seem like there's a lot of information, but Advisor is a flexible and customizable tool. So you will take things that are valuable and you'll increase the priority on them, maybe make them more sensitive or less sensitive if you don't think it's very valuable. And in some cases, if CloudGuard is giving you notifications for something that you don't think is important, then you can have CloudGuard stop monitoring for it, because the goal here is to take this tool, CloudGuard, and have it so that all the information it gives you is useful. That way, when you check CloudGuard each day, you're getting a autonomous source of useful information to you. And after you get those useful recommendations, you'll be able to act on them to make your tenancy more secure, save cost, and that's kind of the end goal. So with that, I will pass it back to Winnie for a demonstration in the console.
All right, thanks, Anil. All right, so now we are in the console. So I'll talk about some of the tools we went over today. So tagging is one, cost analysis, as well as budgeting. So we'll go over tagging first. So tagging will be located on our menu button here at the left-hand side, and it'll be located under governance and administration near the bottom. So it'll be under tenancy management. So we're going to go ahead and click on tag namespaces. So with tagging, you'll have to, before you can start applying tags to your resources, you have to create them. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. So tag namespaces will be where we start off, because this is where your tag keys will be stored in. So again, it's really important where your compartment is selected right now. So right now I'm not in the correct compartment. So I'm going to go ahead and find that one, which is Vision Corp. So we have an active tag namespace here, but before I click into it, I want to show you how to create it. So really, really simple. What you'll do is create your tag namespace in a compartment that you specify here. And then you'll give your namespace a name as well as a description. And then you also have the ability to tag your tag namespace, but again, this is like just an optional step. And then you can go ahead and create your tag namespace. So let's take a look at an existing one. So this one is called Vision Corp, and at the top here, you have a couple of options. So one, if you forgot to tag this resource with a tag, you can go ahead and click on Add Tags and go back and tag it. You can also move this tag namespace to a different compartment. And you can also retire the tag namespace and then delete it after you've retired it. Under your tag namespace, you'll find some information. So most notably, you'll see your OCI here, the number of cost tracking tags, and the compartment that it's in. And under all of that, we have the tag key definitions that have been created in this specific namespace. So we have 4, but before we talk about them, I want to show you how to create one. So when you're creating these tag keys, the first step will be that best practice to, name it with a keyword or just a word that's going to be popularly searched on, and then give it a description. And under that, you can enable cost tracking for this tag. So if you wanted to make this a cost tracking tag, this is where you would do so by checking off this box here. And lastly, you'll have to choose a tag value type for this tag key. So if you want to use a static value, so what this does is the user who is trying to apply this tag to a resource, they will be able to enter a unique string value for this specific tag key. Or you can choose the list of values option. So this one is a little bit different. So what you'll do is give the user options to choose from, string values to choose from, and it will show up as a drop-down menu for the user to pick and choose one. So if you just wanted to limit the amount of values they can choose from to 3 or even 1 or 2, you could do so by using a list of values. So this also carries over to tag defaults. So just keep this in mind before we talk about tag defaults. So let's take a look at our active ones. So we have Apex. This is a string value type. It's active and it is not cost tracking enabled. And we also have name. So name is also string value type, but this is going to be our only cost tracking tag. So just keep an eye on this one because I'll be referencing it in the budgeting section. And the last one I want to point out is type. So type has a list value type. And so let's go ahead and click on that. So with type, you can see the admin perspective, you can see the tag values for the specific tag key that the user can choose from and it has been set up with. You can also edit this tag key definition. So there's really quite a few things you can edit. So you can edit the description. You can also make this a cost tracking tag or, the opposite. And you can also change the tag value type. So if you want to go from list to static value, you can do so, or vice versa. So now that you have, a couple of tag keys created, now what you can do is set up your tag default or start applying these tags. So what we'll do first is set up the tag default. So as I mentioned in the lecture, tag defaults are going to be associated with compartments. So that's exactly where we're going to head over to now. So menu button once again, and then we will go to identity and security because that is where compartments live. And if you want to create tag defaults for a certain compartment, what you'll do is head over to that specific compartment. So for me, it's a child compartment. So I'm just going to click into the child compartment, which is called Vision Corp. And tag defaults will be located on the left-hand side under resources, third one down. And at the bottom here, this is where you'll find your active tag defaults. So we have one, but before I talk about this, I want to show you how to create one. So tag defaults, as I mentioned before, it's utilizing an existing tag namespace and tag key that already lives in your environment. So what we'll do here is just keep it consistent. We'll just go ahead and continue to work with Vision Corp. And based on your namespace selection, you'll be able to see the tag keys that are available in that namespace. So I want to show you, okay, so if I click on name here, it'll actually give me an error because there is a tag default that already exists for this tag key. So you can't have more than 2 tag defaults using the same tag key in a compartment. So what I'll do is just click on owner. And the last thing you'll have to do is choose a tag value option for this tag default. So you have one option being default value. So this is where you set the string value, and it will be used as the tag value for everything that the tag default tags. So maybe it could be like testing or something, and they'll all have the value of testing. The other option is a user applied value. So this is what it sounds like. So the user who is creating the resource, they will have to input their own string value in the tag value area and then be able to create the resource. If they don't input the value for this specific tag namespace and tag key combination, then OCI will not let them create the resource. So it's also a good way to force your employees to, make sure they're tagging their resources that they're creating. So for this specific one, what I wanted to point out is it also depends on the tag key you've selected. So this tag key owner, it does have a string value. So that's why for this user applied value, it can be any string value that the user inputs. But for example, if we choose type, which has a list value option, the user applied value will instead be a list. And also the default value will change. So instead of you going in and putting whatever string value you want for the default value, you'll have to choose between one of the allocated ones that have been created for this tag key. So just something to keep in mind. And once you have these filled out, then you can go ahead and create. And so let's take a look at our tag default here. So we've used Vision Corp namespace, name tag key, and the default value Vision Corp. And we see that it is a cost tracking tag. So let's take a look at one of the just previous resources I've created. So I'm going to go to storage and then go to object storage bucket. And I'm going to click on the first one. So I'm going to click on the tagging section here. So this is where you can see all the tags that have been applied to this resource. So as you can see here, this first one, this is actually the tag default that we were looking at. And another thing is we have these Oracle tags called created by and created on. And so this is where you can use your tag variables to standardize the value. So for example, this one, it tells you, who created this resource. And for this different tag variable, it's using the date and time tag variable. So another way to use the tag default, and these have been placed in the root compartment. So all of the resources created in the child compartments, they will also have this tag. All right, so now that we have our tags set up and we kind of know what is going on with them, I'm going to head into budgeting. So again, going to the menu and then going into billing and cost management, and budgets will be under cost management. So we have 2 active budgets here, but what I want to do is create one first to show you what it looks like. So when you're creating a budget, you have 3 different scopes to choose from. You can choose a child tenancy if it exists for you. You can choose a compartment to set your budget on, which I mentioned earlier, or you can use a cost tracking tag. So I'm going to go with the cost tracking tag today and show you what that looks like. So you'll go ahead and choose your tag namespace. Again, I'm going to keep it consistent. And In Vision Corp namespace, we only have one cost tracking tag, so that's why we only see name. And then you can go ahead and input a value that you want to set for the budget. And under that, this is where you can specify the schedule for the budget. So it can either be evaluating at a monthly view, or you can use a custom schedule. So for both monthly and custom, you will have to input a budget amount that you want to use, and then you can toggle the date. So for custom, you can basically choose the dates, the start date and the end date for your budget. But for monthly, you'll just go ahead and choose the day of the month to specify for the budget processing. And under that, you have your optional section, which is to set up your budget alert rule. So Sunil talked about this, you have your actual spend threshold metric or your forecast spend, and you can receive notifications based on that. So with actual spend and forecast spend, what you'll have to do is specify if you want to use a percentage of the budget to receive notifications on, or an absolute amount in dollar value. So if it's, percentage of budget, you go ahead and enter your percentage, and same thing for absolute with your value. And here you can specify your email recipients. So their email addresses will be put here. You can enter more than one, and you can enter the email message for this specific budget alert rule. So it can be like, hello, like you've reached 50% of your budget. That would be X amount of money, blah, blah, blah. Really up to you. But this is what the recipient would see. And so once you have that set up, then you can go ahead and create your budget. So if we take a look at an existing budget, you'll also see that you can create multiple budget alert rules. So in our budget alert rule section, we see that we actually have an actual spend budget alert rule, and we also have a forecast spend. So this is what we were talking about earlier, how you can have both actual and forecast spend in your budget. And you can also create more than two for sure. All right, so back to budget. So last but not least, I wanted to go over cost analysis. So that will also be under cost management. So I'm going to just go ahead and go to cost analysis. And this at the top here, this is where you can really filter out what you're looking for. So if you wanted to get a certain type of report, you could take a look at, what's included in your tenancy. So we have cost by service. So whether it's compute or databases, storage, you'll be able to see that breakdown. But you can also see cost by service and description, service and SKU, service and tag even, as well as compute costs and monthly costs. So monthly cost, if you choose that, and apply, it will go ahead and update for you. And you can also have some report actions on the right-hand side. And in this little section here, this is where you can get more granular. So you can toggle the start and end date. You can change the granularity. So I believe since we're in monthly costs, that's why we see monthly. But if I do cost by service, you'll see that you can also see daily. And you can also choose between cost and usage, and also even show forecast. You can also add filters. So if you wanted to narrow down on a specific availability domain or region or tag, you could do so here, as well as select a grouping dimension. So you have a couple to choose from. And then once you, apply that, then you can see. So let me there we go. Yeah, so I've added a filter. You can add multiple filters, but for grouping dimensions, you can only have one enabled. So under that, you'll be able to see your cost details. So because we're working with an internal tenancy, I actually can't see the numerical values based on my access, but it will look like either a bar graph, a line graph, or stack lines, depending on what you want to see, and you'll be able to see how much you're consuming. Tab actions, so this is really important. You can actually download these tables or even this current tab as a PDF to share or just have on your system. And you can also download the chart at the bottom as well. So this is just a different way to look at the consumption. This is more of a table view. And I think there's a question about scheduled reports. So I wanted to just quickly show you where you can find that. So you can create scheduled reports to run reports daily or monthly in your specified object storage. If you wanted to pull it manually, you can also take a look at cost and usage reports. So these are generated daily. These are CSVs for cost and usage reports, and you can find them here. I believe not all usage reports will be found here, but they are stored in an object storage bucket that you can access. So we are at the top of the hour. So I will just go ahead and end things here.
Awesome session. Thank you, Winnie and Sunil. Really appreciate your time and help with this session. I hope it was a good learning experience for everyone. So our next session will be the Oracle Networking Quickstart on October 17th. So in this session, you'll be introduced to the core OCI networking services, how to deploy them, and best practice considerations for when and why to use these services. We also do have hands-on workshops every second Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, so please feel free to join. And yeah, thanks everyone, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.